The night after, the lake still clung to my skin, like cold that had decided to live there. I had showered twice and changed into the thickest sweatshirt I owned. But sometimes the body refuses to believe what the mind insists upon. I kept seeing the way the windshield spidered under the first swing and didn't give. The terrible stubbornness of safety glass against desperation. The way her pale face hovered behind it, calm and panicked at once. Laura was 41 and I was 24, and there are some numbers that act like fences until a hand reaches across them. When she pressed her palm to the window and I pressed mine to the outside. The lake pressed against both of us harder than any town's judgment could. I had not known, until that moment, how loud water could be. By 8 that evening the garage below my apartment had gone quiet. It was a small town, 2 bars, 3 churches, a diner that refused to change the coffee brand since something like 1998. I stood by the little window above my workbench and watched the wet street shine under the streetlight. My phone lay face down, a tire iron's shadow still in my mind. My forearms stippled with cuts I hadn't bothered to dress because tenderness had made me careless with my own skin. I wasn't waiting for anything. Waiting would be presumptuous. I was only breathing slowly. And each breath found the fragments I hadn't let myself look at directly, the way she shook afterward. The way her voice had thinned into a child's for a second when we reached the shore. The way her eyes refused to close even when it was over. The phone buzzed. When I turned it over, her name filled the screen. A simple, domestic name that used to be attached to Mike's mom, who made too much potato salad at graduation parties and laughed with her whole shoulders. The message was nothing like a confession and everything like a bridge. If you're free, come over tonight. I read it twice because the brain likes to be sure when the heart already is. I typed, deleted, typed again, only if you're sure. Then I sent it and felt the absurd shiver that comes when you relay consent back to the person who granted it. It wasn't a ritual. It was a lock clicking into place on the right side of a door. Her reply came after a long minute that I used to count the notches on my wrench roll. I am, but I'm nervous. Me too, I sent. I'll sit on the sofa. We can talk. There's another kind of cold that comes from walking into a house that hasn't warmed back up to its owner since the last fear lived there. Laura opened the door before I could knock, the porch light trembling as if it were caught between wanting to be steady and wanting to warn ships. Her hair was damp. She must have showered again too. Her hands fussed with the hem of a sweater that hung loose enough to make me think she had chosen comfort in defiance of every other demand, including the town's appetite for reading meanings into fabric. "Hi," she said, and her voice carried the small disbelieving smile of someone who is grateful both that she is alive and that a person she asked for has arrived. "Come in, I made tea. I didn't know if you drink tea, but coffee felt too jittery for tonight." "Tea's perfect," I said. I didn't tell her I would have drunk engine coolant if she had asked me in that voice. The living room smelled faintly of cedar and something floral. There was a blanket draped over the back of the sofa, and the sight of it warmed something in me I hadn't named yet. I sat on the far cushion, left a deliberate, visible space. She noticed. Relief loosened her shoulders by a degree so small it would have been invisible to anyone who had not watched those same shoulders tense against a seatbelt while water rose. She brought 2 big mugs with a patience I recognized as courage in disguise. When she set mine down, I asked, "Can I touch your hand?" The question surprised both of us in how easily it came out. Asking felt like the only way to trust my own body again after it had been a machine built for breaking glass. "Yes," she said, and placed her right hand palm up on the coffee table like the offering that it was. I rested my fingers over hers lightly. The gentlest talk I had ever applied to anything. There was a tremor still, but it was the tremor of a leaf in the wind, not of a boat about to capsize. We sat like that for the 3 heartbeats it took to teach both our bloodstreams that nothing terrible was happening. Then I let go. "I don't know how to do this," she said, and the words were not an apology. "I mean, gratitude is simple. I could write a check for the window. I could bake. I could make a speech at the town hall. You know how people do. But what's left after the public gestures is this private thing I've been living with for years, The quiet. And today the quiet was a lake. And you broke it, which makes me feel more, I don't know, seen than I have in a long time. That's frightening. I don't know how to do this either. I said, I fix machines because problems obey torque and angles. People don't. I've wanted to help for a while. The mailbox in the winter. The driveway when you had the flu. Her head snapped up. That was you. Only because you had a flu and a shovel that weighed more than it should have. I said, I didn't want to make anything weird. I wanted, I don't know, to move the world 2 inches closer to fair. She laughed, a quick bright thing, then pressed her fingers to her lips as if the sound might spill more than she intended. Mike would tease me for crying at kindness. She said, he's 26 and convinced that stoicism is free. He's allowed to be wrong. I said, tonight I wanted to be where you asked me to be. The way you asked. She nodded and breathed, and the breath came out less jagged. Can we make some rules? I could have kissed the floor for the sanity of that question. Please. She stood, went to a little drawer by the phone, and came back with a pack of sticky notes and a pen with flowers on it. The notepad looked like something that had lived there for grocery lists and appointment reminders and now had been drafted into service as a treaty. She wrote, then angled the note so we could both read. No touching without asking. No texts after 10 p.m. Tell the truth when something feels off. She wrote a fourth and looked at me sideways. We will go slow. Will this make you feel more able to breathe? I asked. Yes, she said. Will it make you feel boxed in? No, I said. It feels like a rail on a staircase. I'm less likely to fall if I hold it. Her smile then was not the thank you of a social interaction but the relief of a person who has been carrying a piano alone and discovers another pair of hands on the other side. She stuck the note to the edge of the coffee table. The gestured domesticity of it, the ordinary stick of the adhesive, felt like a benediction. We talked quietly about unremarkable things. Because ordinary is the best way to rehabilitate a life that's been shaken. We talked about the way the lake looked in winter when the sun made it into a giant mirror that hurt to stare at. We talked about the diner's pie hierarchy. I told her there was a mechanic's superstition that swearing softly at a bolt works better than shouting. She laughed again, and then her eyes glistened with that betrayal tears perform when laughter moves the wrong way and jostles grief awake. She looked away and blotted at the corner of her eye with the back of her sleeve like she didn't deserve a tissue yet. Can I sit a little closer? I asked. She considered, then nodded. Yes. I moved one cushion closer. Not touching. The air changed anyway. A room can recalibrate around a person's decision. A sofa can become a shoreline. From the front window, a set of headlights slid across the blinds. Paused the way a car pauses when the driver makes a judgment that isn't their business. Then moved on. We both watched the light's quiet geometry on the wall. The town did not have many secrets. Only timings. People rarely knew a whole story here. They knew the moment when someone turned left who usually turned right. I can go, I said, if that would keep your life simpler. She shook her head quickly and then, as if catching herself in a fear she didn't want to obey, said, stay 10 minutes. Just 10. She looked at the sticky note as though it could testify on her behalf. That feels like something I chose. Okay, I said. I set an alarm for 10 minutes. The enormity of that small act, of time being something we shaped together rather than fell into, settled over us like heat returning to a room when the furnace kicks on. For a long breath we sat, listening to the clock. People will talk, she said, not confessing, just acknowledging whether they will. I said, they did before this, just about other things. They like the smell of a story more than the truth of it. What will you tell Mike? She asked, jaw tightening on his name. The truth when it's time. I said, which is that you called me. And I went, and we made rules, and we decided not to lie to ourselves about how we feel but also not to run at it like a fire. He loves you, Laura. He wants you safe. I do too. Does it bother you that I'm older? The question came out with the clinical frankness of a person who has forced herself to approach her life like a case study in order to manage it. It sits in the room with us. I said, but it's not sitting in my chair. She laughed again, then sobered, then looked at me in a way I recognized from the lake, like a person calculating a trajectory. Can I try something? You can ask, I said, and heard how gently bossy I sounded and didn't hate myself for it. I want to see how it feels to be close without crossing anything I'll regret. She said, to test the railing. Okay, I said, and the air thinned out and thickened at once. She slid 1 inch closer. Then another. We could see each other's pores. The breath between us warmed. She looked at my mouth the way someone looks at a closed door they aren't sure they should open. I didn't move. She didn't either. We stayed in that unkiss for a beat that was longer than patience and shorter than surrender. The phone on the table vibrated. The name on the screen, Mike, took up all the light in the room. We both exhaled, a shared, wry, slightly pained sound that contained relief too. And it amazed me that emotions can braid like that. Answer, she whispered. Please. I did. Hey, I said, and kept my voice as easy as weather. You okay? Yeah, he said. I heard about the lake. I'm out of state still, but I'm driving back this weekend. Mom okay? She's okay, I said. I looked at her and her expression was a small, brave nod, shaken, tired, but okay. Thanks for going, he said, like it was the most natural thing in the world that a friend would run into water for his mother. In the world I wanted to live in. It would be. I'll call her now. She may be asleep, I said softly. Text first. Right. He said. Talk soon. When the call ended, the room exhaled again. That was a grace, she said, half to herself. What a mercy to be interrupted by something that reminded me we have a son in this story. You have a son, I said. I have a friend who is also a line I don't intend to cross without a map. The alarm I had set earlier chimed. The sound was not a dismissal but a benediction we had chosen. I stood, put my mug in the sink, rinsed it as if that tiny etiquette could balance the universe. At the door I hesitated. Do you want a hug? I asked, one of those brief, church foyer versions that exist to remind bodies they're allowed to be held. Yes, she said, please. I stepped forward and placed my arms around her with the kind of care that feels like work until you remember it's also love in the most animal sense. Her hands came to my back and pressed just enough to make me feel the outline of myself. We stood there for 3 breaths. When we let go, her face had softened in a way that made me think of frost retreating. Thank you for leaving, she said, and then laughed at herself. I mean, for leaving when we said you would. For leaving as care, not refusal. Thank you for letting me. I said, text me tomorrow after 10 a.m. I want sleep to be the thing between us tonight. Not words. She nodded. I walked to my truck under a sky that hadn't decided if it wanted to clear or brood. The town wakes early to gossip. By 9 the next morning, according to the diner, 3 people had seen my truck at Laura's house and one had invented a theory in which the lake rescue was a ploy and I had staged the tire tracks with a snow shovel. People like plots flatteringly complicated when truth is a simple tense compassion. I fixed a carburetor and listened to the radio because the radio doesn't ask questions as personal as small towns do. At 10 on the dot my phone pinged. Thank you for letting me decide the tempo. The text read, I slept. The quiet behaved. I considered my response and decided restraint was a better poem than anything I could type. I sent a thumbs up and a picture of my coffee cup with the old chip mug that said Best Grandpa on it because customers leave odd trophies behind and I liked the way it made me feel borrowed and harmless. She sent back a laughing face and a picture of the sticky note stuck to her fridge door now. The 4th line, we will go slow, had a tiny heart drawn next to it. Not romantic so much as tender toward herself. By noon, the rumor had become a rumor about the rumor and I realized my silence gave people room to narrate. I went to the diner for lunch. Because an honest appetite is its own alibi. The bell over the door rang. Heads turned, then turned back, the way people do when the show they're watching pretends not to know it's on stage. Marnie, the waitress who had watched me grow from a kid who ordered pancakes with too much syrup to a man who requested eggs like he had somewhere to be afterward. Poured coffee without asking. Heard you were a fish now. she said, casual as carpeting. I float, I said. Laura okay? She asked. And there was the softening in her tone that happens when concern remembers it still knows compassion's job description. She is, I said, shaken, sleeping better. Good, she said, and patted my hand. Someone in a booth muttered something with my name in it and the words, above the garage, and Marnie turned her head just enough to raise one eyebrow at them. Quiet returned to its decent disguise. In the afternoon, I caught myself counting the hours until evening as if time were a rope ladder I could pull toward me. I texted Laura at 4 to ask if she wanted me to replace her windshield that week or if that was too fast for her nervous system. She wrote back that the insurance would cover it Friday and that she would rather not sit in a shop again so soon anyway. She was trying to let her body believe that not every small room meant danger now. I told her I could come by Saturday morning to check the door frame for warping from the impact. She replied with a yes. And then a second message. Can we meet for coffee tomorrow morning at the diner? In public. I want to let the story be ordinary where it can be. Yes, I wrote. 9, she sent a thumbs up. The simple geometry of that made me feel a steadiness I'd seen in other men only after they had built a fence straight. The evening came slow like a cat. I fixed a lawnmower for a woman who cussed like a poet and told me my hands looked like they belonged to someone who could take a punch without resenting it. I laughed and thought about Laura's hands. How small grief had made them look even though they could carry a full grocery bag in each and refuse help until the third trip. I didn't drive past Laura's house. Not because I didn't want to see the porch light, but because wanting isn't a summons and I was teaching myself not to behave like it was. That night I dreamed a dream in which water made sounds like applause when a person did the right thing. I woke smiling and then a little embarrassed about it. At 8:45 the next morning I walked into the diner and chose a table by the window where the light could do its ordinary work of making people look like themselves. Laura arrived at 8:59. She wore jeans and a soft blue sweater and no makeup that I could tell. There was a smudge of something, flour, maybe, at her wrist. And the domestic accident of it felt more intimate than perfume would have. Hi, she said, and sat, and exhaled with the posture of a person who has just finished a long, precise task. I nearly left my house 3 times because I remembered people have eyes. People also have coffee, I said, and slid the menu toward her as if it were a shield. And omelets. Marnie appeared with a grin that was both mischievous and maternal. Well, if it isn't the lake's worst enemy and our best pie judge. She said, you want the special, Laura? Please, Laura said, some gratitude sneaking through because normal is a kindness when you haven't been allowed it. We ordered. We talked about ordinary things again by design, the weather's indecision. Mike's penchant for texting at odd hours when he's on jobs out of state. We didn't make a spectacle of not touching. We just didn't. If someone in the diner wanted a show, what they got instead was 2 adults paying attention to their eggs and to each other's sentences in equal measure. It felt like adults doing a difficult thing, practicing a relationship with the town as witness without allowing the town to be a participant. Halfway through breakfast, a man named Carl, who lived 3 houses down from Laura and had never learned the difference between friendliness and entitlement, came by our table under the pretense of community. Heard about the rescue, he said, with a smile that had too many teeth for breakfast. Quite a night. His eyes dipped to Laura's hand as if expecting to see mine on it. He was rewarded with the absence of scandal. He looked disappointed. Quite a night, I agreed, and afterward, quite a sleep. Well, he said, folks will talk. Let them, Laura said. Give them something to do besides smoke. She took a deliberate sip of coffee and turned back to me. The dismissal was clean. Carl drifted away, already looking for a new place to put his curiosity. Thank you, she said when he was out of earshot, for existing as if we are not a spectacle. It helps that we are not. I said, spectacles have feathers. We have sticky notes. She laughed and pressed her lips together to keep the laugh from spilling. Not because laughter wasn't allowed but because she wanted to savor it. We finished breakfast. She paid without arguing because generosity is always negotiating with pride and this time generosity won. Outside the diner, the sky had decided on a blue that made the lake look like it might forgive itself. A few people we knew nodded. One woman I had known since Little League had the decency to look embarrassed about being caught looking. "Can we walk for a minute?" Laura asked. We crossed the street toward the lake path. The water wore nothing but light. "I dreamed last night that I was still in the car," she said, "but in the dream when I tried to open the door, there was a note taped to it. Ask first." I woke up laughing at myself. My subconscious is a hall monitor. Mine put an alarm clock in my pocket. I said. I woke up almost disappointed when there wasn't one there. She reached into her bag and pulled out the sticky note. It had been folded and unfolded enough to look like a small map. "I put it on the fridge," she said. "I wanted to bring it today because I thought it might earn a public life." She looked at me and then at the lake. "Can I put it in your wallet? Just for a day, so that you carry the rules too, so I don't feel like I am the only one holding them?" "Yes," I said, and held out my wallet. She slid the note behind my driver's license, where it made a soft sound that seemed louder than paper should. The intimacy of bureaucracy, of rules sitting near identity, felt right. We stood there, not touching, and looked at the water like two people reading a language it had written for them. "I don't want to hide," she said, "but I don't want to perform either. I want to be allowed a middle, an honest middle." "That's what slow is," I said, "a middle with a spine." She nodded and an odd peace came over her face. Like a weather pattern had changed behind her eyes. "I have to go," she said. "There's a stack of laundry that thinks it owns me. And I promised myself I'd go to the library and not Google hypothermia symptoms anymore. Text me after 10 tomorrow," I said, not because I needed to remind her of the rule, because keeping it together delighted me. "I'll come by Saturday morning to check the car frame." "Thank you," she said, and then added, with a smile that admitted she was making a choice and enjoying it, "Can I hug you?" "Yes," I said. The hug on the sidewalk was a little less church foyer and a little more human. But it still obeyed the shape of our pact. We let go before it could become a scene, and because letting go when you intend to is a power people underestimate. Saturday brought sunlight and a steadier portion of myself. I changed out the cracked trim near her window and showed her the spot where the metal had crumpled like a brow in worry. We stood by the car together and looked at the scar. "It will always be there," I said, "hidden by the new parts, but there. That isn't necessarily bad. It means the car remembers it survived." "I like that," she said. "I like the idea that not all memory is danger." She held a small shard of the safety glass I had saved without deciding to. It was less dangerous now than it had been in the water. "Can I keep this?" she asked. "Of course," I said. "I'll put it in the junk drawer," she said, smiling, "the place where dangerous things go to become reminders instead." That evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Mike. "Home tomorrow," it said. "Dinner?" I felt the word like a test and chose to read it as an invitation. "Sure," I wrote. "Your place or mine?" He sent an address and the time. I told Laura. She wrote back a single word, "brave." Then, "Do you want me to be nearby in case it goes badly?" The tenderness of that undid me a little. "No," I wrote. "If it goes badly, I want it to go honestly. If it goes well, I want to deserve that too." Mike's face the next day held all the ages I had known it at once. The 6-year-old who took his helmet off backward. The 16-year-old who believed acceleration meant invincibility. The man who now chewed the inside of his cheek when he was scared. We ate burgers. We talked about nothing special. And then he put his hands flat on the table like a person bracing for a storm that might or might not arrive. "I heard more than I wanted to hear," he said, "from people who know less than they think. I didn't call you to interrogate you. I called because the real version matters more to me than all the shows." He looked at me directly. "Do you love my mom?" The question shouldn't have shocked me and did anyway. I breathed once to let my answer arrive whole. "I don't know if love is the first word yet," I said, "but I know I am practicing respect. And sometimes respect is a better beginning than fireworks." He stared, then snorted a laugh that was a release valve. "God, you sound old," he said, and shook his head, "but I think I like that better than the alternative." He rubbed his jaw. then nodded at nothing. If she's choosing this, if you're choosing slow, then I can choose to not be the boy who thinks his mom is a territory. Thank you, I said, because the words were both a gift and a permission I hadn't demanded. Keep the rules, he said. Don't break her. Don't let the town break you. I won't, I said. When I left his place, the sky had decided to be clean about everything. I drove toward the lake and parked at the pull-off where the tire tracks still bruised the mud. I stood there a while and listened to the water say the same thing over and over, the sound language makes when it refuses to abandon its grammar. I texted Laura and told her it had gone as well as such things can go. She sent back a heart, then corrected herself with a thumbs up and a smile because sometimes a symbol is too much and you dial it back out of respect for your own pace. I laughed aloud standing by the lake. In the weeks that followed, ordinary became our art. She texted after 10. I answered when the world had put its pajamas on. We saw each other in public spaces and sometimes on her porch with the light behind us like a drawn curtain that meant privacy not secrecy. When we were tired, we said so. When we were lonely, we didn't pretend we weren't. On a Tuesday when I forgot to ask before I placed my hand briefly on her shoulder to guide her around a puddle. I stopped 2 steps later and apologized. She smiled and said, "My body said yes even if your mouth didn't. Thank you for asking its opinion retroactively." We learned to catch our mistakes before they turned into habits. The town adjusted. People still watched because watching is half of what people do in places where the sky is big and the nights are long. But they found other topics: gas prices, the high school team, a rabbit that had learned how to scare itself in windows. The rescue became a story people told about that week. A storm showed up and somebody did something useful. Sometimes usefulness is the best reputation. One evening in early autumn, Laura and I sat on the porch steps. The air had a new edge to it that made you think of red leaves even before they arrived. "I feel different in my skin," she said, as if she were reporting her blood pressure. I thought being saved would make me feel indebted. Instead it made me feel permitted. To ask, to say what I want, to say what I don't, to tell the truth before it leaks out as damage. Maybe that's what rescue is supposed to be, I said, not a debt but a door. She leaned her shoulder lightly against mine, then tipped away just as lightly with that small grin that had become our shorthand for we could and we won't. Not yet. Down the street, a porch light came on. Across the lake, a fisherman's radio crackled. Somewhere, a boy on a bicycle practiced leaving. We sat there and let the town belong to itself while we practiced belonging to ourselves. The rules on the sticky note were soft at the corners now. Less like commandments and more like promises we had learned how to keep even without looking. "Do you ever miss the drama?" she asked suddenly. "The big gestures, the way television teaches us to want the spectacular scene." "I used to," I said, "but then I remembered this is my life. Not a season finale. I like repairs. They're quiet, they last." She nodded, and for a long moment we listened to the lake discover the shore again and again. The way it always does. Later, when I stood to leave, she reached for my hand. And I asked, and she said yes, and our fingers braided like ropes engineered for both strength and release. We let go at the sidewalk. I walked to my truck under a sky that had made peace with the darkness it carried. Behind me, her porch light steadied. Ahead of me, the town kept offering its small lights to anyone who needed to see. I drove home not to outrun anything but to arrive where I could sleep knowing our pace belonged to us and the story could be ordinary for one more day. Which felt like the bravest way for it to be extraordinary.